On today's lesson, we're going to talk about physical and chemical properties. So what is a property? Well, it's a characteristic of a material or substance that can be observed. And that can be observed through your eyes visually, through your nose by smelling, basically using your five senses. The two types of properties that we deal with are physical, a property that can be observed without changing the substance. Think of those like physical attributes, color, size, and so on. And then chemical properties, and these are properties that talk about how the substance reacts or changes. Think about this as like a person and how they act. The first physical property I'd like to talk about is state. And this is a solid. Is the material a solid, liquid, or gas at room temperature? And so we see if we add temperature to the mix, we go from solid liquid to a gas. And the coffee, of course, is a liquid at room temperature. The next physical property or characteristic I'd like to talk about is hardness. And this is the ability of a substance to resist being scratched. And that defines how hard a material is. A diamond is an extremely hard material. It scratches other materials and doesn't get scratched easily itself. Physical property number 3 is a property called luster, which tells about how shiny a substance is, the shininess of substance. So a substance with a high luster, an example of that would be gold or silver or copper, because they've got a high level of shininess, so that's luster. Another physical property is called malleability, and that's the ability of a material to be hammered into thin sheets. Metals have a high luster. Some metals have a high malleability. An example would be aluminum, which can be hammered into thin sheets for aluminum foil. Another physical property is the property of density, which is the relationship between mass and volume. An object which is less dense will float on one which is more dense. An example would be a boat or a raft, and also ice cubes floating on water. Another physical characteristic or property is ductility. So you would talk about a material's ability to get stretched into a wire. So it would have a high ductility if it can get stretched into wire, like copper wiring, and some things have a low ductility, which means they cannot be stretched into a wire. Another physical property is conductivity, and it's the measure of the ability of a substance to pass heat or electricity. In terms of passing heat, we might want our clothes not to pass heat very well and to have a low conductivity. In terms of electricity, stuff like copper wiring, it's important that it has a high electrical conductivity. And in terms of chemical properties, remember it was how a substance reacts. So is it flammable? How does it react, and does it burst into flames easily? We could also talk about its explosiveness and how it reacts with acid, what happens when you add it to acid. And we could also talk about whether it causes rust over time. So chemical changes are to do with reactions over time, but how do you know that they've occurred? Well, there may be a color change, might be gas given off. Another clue that a chemical change has happened is there would be a temperature increase, and another clue is that there may be a strong smell or odor produced.
Created using Powtoon.